Hello, greetings, and welcome to Conversation with Tony Mobley. Today on Conversation with Tony Mobley, it is both simulcast on YouTube and LinkedIn Live. Welcome, radio listeners in Cincinnati, Ohio on Z98. You can hear us on the radio by going to z98fm.com. On Conversation with Tony Mobley today, I am talking with Mr. Stan Bush, and this is episode 84 of Conversations with Tony Mobley. And thanks to everyone for being a part of the journey. And I want to thank the team behind Conversations with Tony Mobley for all of their hard work. You can go to conversationwithtonymobley.com, and there, courtesy of Alex Lindsay and 090, you can register for the interactive chat. It's called Mukana. Why do I want you to go to the interactive chat called Mukana? The reason I want you to go there is because you can put your questions in and you can get those questions voted up or down. That's right. And so we're only here for an hour. And so you can ensure that your question gets asked and answered during our conversation. So again, go to conversationwithtonymobley.com and you can get your question in the queue to be answered. And so now we're going to get started, and we're going to have a conversation with my good friend, Stan Bush, who I have not seen in some time. And the last time we saw each other, it was on Blab. And so, hello, Stan Bush.
How's it going, Tony?
It's going great, man. Good to see you. Glad you could be here with me tonight.
I'm trying to remember whether it was Blab or whether it was over on Facebook, because we wound up with a little Facebook group there for a little while. We met in too. So, and I've been in a lot of different places. So
I think you might be right. We're going to get right to it because we are getting a few questions popping in right now. And so the very first question, which I know you're not going to have a problem with answering, is who is Stan Bush?
Well, I guess there's always this pat answer people give that's like, I'm a grandfather, I'm a dad, I'm a grandfather, I'm a husband, I'm a wife, I'm a brother, I'm a son, I'm uncles and nephews, I'm all of that. But really, I'm a hen. I call myself like a hen's teeth puller and a overqualified cat herder. That's really what I do. I take issues and things, and I just enjoy fixing stuff. That's really what drives me is to see new things that come out that help somebody solve a problem. That's why I said something to Taylor, pre-show, was that problem solvers I love them. I love them to death.
And speaking of problem solving, how did your parents impact you in the way that you found that is a valuable thing to want to do, to be able to be a problem solver?
Well, I came up, my dad had like 11 in his family. My mother had, I think, either 9 or 11 in her family. So it was a very large family, right? And so one of the problems that we were always solving problems. Where were we going to go? How was everybody going to get that many people at one house at one time? It was always those sort of things. And my mom and dad were always problem solvers. I'm going to tell you a story about my dad if you got time.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I was driving. He was my dad worked for Piggly Wiggly for one day. That's all. He worked for him for one day, and he was a meat cutter, butcher, and he didn't like that job, so he went to work at an auto parts store. And he only had one job his whole life after that. That was that job at the auto parts store, but he was really, really good at it. And I was moving from Kansas City to Louisiana, to Nolens. And my car, at about 2 o'clock in the morning, my car started making this noise. And it was it was, I knew that I was going to have to pull off. And, at 2 o'clock in the morning, there's especially back in the, that would have been in the 70s. There was nobody, there was no, no places open to work on. So I called my dad. I pulled up in a little payphone. A lot of these guys that are listening to it probably might not know what that is, but I pulled into a payphone and I dropped my, I think I called him collect. As now that I think about it, I probably called him collect. And he said, I said, well, it's doing this. And this is going to prove how much of a problem solver he was. And he said, I said, making this noise. And he said, well, hold the phone up to it. Right. So I held the phone up to it, to the car, so he could hear it running. Right. And he said, you got a hairdryer in your car? Because he knew, back then, I mean, everybody used hair dryers and stuff, to get your hair all coiffed and things, So I said, yeah, we got a hairdryer. I got a hairdryer in the car. He said, well, there's a little spring in there. I want you to get that spring out. And he showed me where to put that spring on. This is a true story. He showed me where to put that spring on in the carburetor. And I was back on the road without a noise as soon as I did that. I mean, I came from a family that they were farmers, right? That's what they were. They were farmers. And if you know I will tell you this, Taylor was talking about problem solving in technology. Well, farmers solve problems every day, because they really are affected by everything that goes on. But anyway, that's some of the things when I came up around a family that did that kind of stuff. Basically the idea was you could get there from here. That was it,
Very cool. Very cool. And since you brought Taylor up, I have to let our radio listeners and our LinkedIn Live and YouTube know that Taylor Sunderhouse is the technical producer for Conversation with Tony Mobley. And that was a part of a pre-show conversation. And so thank you, Taylor, and thank you, team, again, for everything that you do. The next question is, how were you able to make video calls in 1995?
Well, again, I got stories, right? I got stories. And so my wife had gone to Massachusetts. Well, I'll go back just a little bit there. When the internet first came out, when it first hit, I'd already been doing some what's called bulletin boards and things before it ever came out, but I was running a radio station. And all of a sudden this thing came out that you could, do stuff on and talk to people in different countries and all sorts of stuff. This was in 1994. And so that's how I pulled that station up from a losing station to a money-making station. And I, got out of that. But my wife went to Massachusetts, and I decided, because she's from Boston, and I decided that I was going to learn technology while she was gone, because she was going to be gone for 3 months during the summer before the kids came back. So I was all alone in the house and working on the computer, right? And there was this application that came out called Powwow. And it was by a place, you can look historically, I may be off by a couple of years or something, but historically, if you look it up, Powwow was one of the first chats like ICQ and those kind of chat things that were being used back then. That was one of the first companies that used that technology, a chat thing. They got into a big war with AOL and everything like that, but they had an application that they introduced. Everything was chat up to that point, right? And this was I think this was 95 too. But everything was chat up till then. But they introduced this thing called See You, See Me, right? And so it was a video thing that you had to have. They didn't offer it to everybody in the community, but they did offer it. And so you had to download it. You had to get the equipment. You had to have everything in order to be able to run that. And this guy named Viper hit me up and said, "Do you want to do you want to do a See You, See Me call?" And I said, "Sure," because I'm my phrase, right? Put me in, coach. I won't play. So he said, "You want to do this video call?" And I said, "Sure." So we went into a video call. And I won't tell you everything that happened in the video call, but it was at that moment that I went, this is going to be a big deal. this whole video thing is going to be a huge deal. So I was at that, I began really kind of a lookout then for video conferencing stuff. And because the CUCME was, although it just wasn't stable, wasn't very stable at all. So, so I started looking for video applications, and I ran across one. And it's I've already checked my WebEx. I don't know if you know what WebEx. You may know what WebEx is. Now,
Yes, I do.
Yeah, well, WebEx is that my login from 1995. My username still works, and so does my password.
Wow.
That's a fact. And so that was one of the first video calls that I did. Was I did the CUCME thing first, but then after that, I did a couple things on WebEx. But WebEx wasn't the same. WebEx was more of a one-to-many kind of. It was more of a one-to-many type of application. It didn't have the vision that people would be interested in doing what you and I are doing right now, right? They wanted to have, I think they still kind of focus on webinars and things like that, where you have somebody who does a presentation and it sends it out to, let's say a group of 200-300 people, that's attending that deal. And so I kept the account, but it didn't really fit, my personality kind of thing. Cause I'm an outgoing, I like to, if you're waiting on me, you're backing up. So I started looking for other stuff and ran across, well, there's a whole lot of stories there, because after that I did some stuff with Chris Brogan, and ran a community for him over, I don't know if anybody knows who he is, but I ran a community for Chris Brogan on Facebook. And then I think Google Plus hit. And then when I hit Google Plus, I went over there, and that community, I took a community over for a guy that had 60,000. There were 60,000 people following him and following our community when I took it over. And when I left it a year later, he had 1 million. And so
Wow.
that was right before Google Plus. But when Google Plus closed and shut down, that's, I kind of migrated over to Blab at that point. We may have even met on Google Plus. I'm not positive, Tony. But
I was on Google Plus initially when it came out, but I really got involved when Meerkat came about.
Yeah. So that's how I wound up. That's some of the history of the video calls and things that I made. I went from a CUCME application to now, I can, like, I really appreciate Taylor, what he's doing, and Laura, what he's doing, because the work that they do behind the scenes, it is a lot more, it's a lot more detailed, and it's a lot more detailed and a lot more complicated than what a lot of people think that it is, because they're used to doing a broadcast. But, I've actually helped somebody do something similar to this, where I managed it for them.
So
You got
the
some
next
questions,
question,
do you?
yeah, the next question is, Meerkat was a good social media platform. What happened?
Well, okay, first of all, on Black, I was more visible. I was more of I had more of an impact and all of that than I did on Meerkat. When I went over and fooled with Meerkat, I did some stuff on Meerkat, but the biggest problem I had with Meerkat was it had to do with how the users interacted with it, right? And how much more difficult it was to use that to actually get engagement off of it than it was. Some people don't agree with this, but I always thought Meerkat was kind of an odd name, for one. And the other thing was that it was a little bit more difficult for people who weren't particularly technical savvy. For example, you had, in order to run a video on Twitter, I think it was, and I may have this backwards, but in order to run a video on Twitter, you had to have a Meerkat connection. I think that's right. but that's you're really testing my memory with that part. But meerkat, I think the biggest problem with meerkat is that they grew a little bit too fast, and that the thing about people being able to use it wasn't really a push button thing like it was kind of, played up to be. Because Blab was, Blab was people went in there and said, hey, and all of a sudden you had 20 people in that meeting, right? Everybody trying to talk at one time because it was so easy. That's why our concept, how many people you think went through those Blab things? Do you know how many people watched those Blabs?
Oh, there was tons and tons of people.
Give me a guess. Because I actually looked this up for this meeting.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
My guess is going to be 150,000. I know that's probably low.
Yeah, you're low by about 30,000. Yeah. Yeah. Because the thing about Blab, though, is that, Blab was most people didn't return to Blab. They didn't go there every day like they were going to Facebook or Twitter or Meerkat or anything else. But they were going over there to learn technology, because you could go to Blab and learn how to use Meerkat, right? You could go to Blab and you could learn how to use Twitter and just about anything you wanted to, because the other platforms really wasn't offering that at the time. So that's one of the things that where Blab, it really hurt them. And from what I think is that one of the things that really hurt them was that they educated a lot of people, but the returning people that came back to watch stuff didn't happen too much, because the content was not, our content was great, because our content was, if you remember, it was the same. We had what is Blab? How do you use Blab? How do you set up your own Blab? Each day of the week, we had a different part that we went over for 20 minutes. It was 20 minutes of Blabus Interruptus. No, 20 minutes of no Blabus Interruptus. That's the title of it. And we had people that came in like yourself, handled one area of it, and so did Ron handled an area of it. And the guy that was in where was he at? Belize. What was his name?
Belize.
Yeah, we had a guy that was in Belize that came in, and now he's back in the States, but he came in and handled an area of each one. So the biggest, one of the best parts about that show, and even the shows that I did on Google Plus, the best part about that show was that it was managed by a team like you guys have, but each person had a certain thing that they did, like this, but there were certain parts of Blab that person talked about. And we didn't let, one of the reasons we always had a lot of people come in was because we didn't let people come into our Blab. If you remember, it was a closed environment. So they couldn't come in and just talk about, mustard and ketchup, because you know how those conversations went in Blab. I mean, it was all of a sudden they were just talking about stuff. You're like, I thought we were going to talk about, football. and now we're talking about how to make ketchup, So that was one of the issues with Blab, is that the conversations were so, so diverse that you didn't know what to go back and watch, regardless of what the title of it was, but they knew what they were getting with us. That's why our viewership was up. The other thing I'm real proud about on that whole thing, and you were part of that, was that if you remember, Blab it was an unstable environment, right? You always had people getting kicked off. You always had all sorts of problems with Blab, except for us. We didn't have a problem because I understood how the network was set up. And so out of all the Blabs that we ran, we did 2 of them a day for the length of the time that was open. There was only one day where we couldn't get in, because one of us didn't get in the morning to get it started. But once somebody got in, I knew I could keep that connection going for the rest of the day, because of I'm not going to tell him what it is yet, what it is yet, Taylor, but because of the technical stuff I had done, in the past. I will tell him that my first connection, my first fastest connection, was when I had 2 2400 baud modems hooked up to 2 lines and combined them into my network. That was,
and what year was that? And what year was that?
I think that was 92. That was before the internet, really. That was, that was what they call bulletin boards and stuff like that. And I was just kind of cutting my teeth and learning a little bit about that stuff. But I think it was 94, 95. I went from 2 phone lines to an ISDN. And then I doubled that and went to 2 ISDNs running the network. And then I finally went to a T1 coming into my house back then, because I already knew that this was going to happen. I knew that from that first video call. I looked and I went, this is going to be awesome. People are going to be able to communicate. People are going to be able to help people. So that's kind of what drove me over, most of those years.
We have to talk about the importance of engagement, because I know that that is a big thing for you. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. So which part of engagement would you like to talk about? Because engagement means, a lot of times people think it means like talking, but sometimes you engage with people by not talking, right? And so tell me what you mean by engagement.
So
that was a big deal. By the way,
things-
I've got a stand-up desk, so I'm going to sit down here for a minute.
Okay. So one of the things that impressed me the most about our interaction was that you were always talking about the importance of first being present.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that you talked a lot about was the importance of hearing what people were saying and the value that everyone should have in. And so this might be a good time for us to share the circadians video. So I'm going to ask my team to prep that and just let me know when we are playing that. And I believe they are playing it. We won't be able to hear it. So we're going to be quiet while it's playing.
Hello, my name is Stan Bush. Welcome to the YouTube channel of the Circadians. The Circadians is a concept community. We live, work, and thrive in a guru-free zone. In our world, everyone is equal, everyone matters, and everyone has their own special gifts. The sum of those gifts is greater than any individual. What we do is we create event-driven, outcome-oriented, business-building platforms. An example of that would be the Blab that we put on every morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The event is the Blab. The outcome is that we want you to be able to use Blab when you leave it, and the business building part of it is that we do get business out of those Blabs. So if that sounds like something that you might be interested in, being on equal footage with everyone that you work with, then you might want to check us out. Send an email to youmatter@thecircadians.com and we'll get back in touch with you. One of us will, because we're all equal. Thanks again.
Okay, so the trailer just finished, and basically it's an overview of what the Circadians are about and your mission and the importance and value of other people and those kinds of things. And so if you don't mind, just a quick recap for our listeners and radio listeners as well.
Well, that was the Circadians happened, and the whole concept for that, or the idea about that, had to do with the circadian rhythm. I couldn't hear what that was talking about, but that was one of the ways that where that name came from, because people kind of know what a circadian rhythm is. That's that 24-hour clock that we all have, right? Well, the circadians, one of the concepts about that was that because we were global, that because when I didn't know this until I ran that Google Plus group, that there's 40 time zones. So I couldn't be up, 24 hours a day and answering questions in those 40 time zones. It was just not possible. But that the way that you could get that done was by using the circadian rhythm, right? This person works best at this time during the day. This is when they're at their prime and so forth. So that's what I did with the moderators, is I used the moderators time frame. It didn't matter to me now the guy that I worked with, he didn't get that. He didn't understand that. He was like, "You got to be there." And I'm like, "I'm not. I can't do this 24 hours a day." That was one of the reasons why we eventually parted ways. But that was the idea where the name came from. But obviously, when I could read, I started smiling because I haven't looked at that thing in a while. I'm probably going to bring it back, but I was looking at it and I was like, oh, everyone is equal, right? Everyone matters, everyone, and everybody has a gift. And so that's why it's important for me when I was putting that stuff out there, that was really the kind of message that if you have something that you want to say, and if you have, no matter what anybody tells you, what you're saying has value, even if you don't think that it is. And if everybody has told you that it doesn't have value, wait, that was 2015 or something like that. Is that what that was? 2015,
Yeah,
2016?
2015.
Yeah. And so that whole concept about, everyone matters and everybody's equal and all that stuff, that just has to do with, the way that I was raised and actually some of the ways that that my parents were raised, that was not, that you notice, right? Our job is our task is to do a better job than our parents were. That's what I look for out of my kids,
Right. Well, again, I just think it's so funny that it seems like I keep running into these communities where it's important for, so office hours theme is a place where no one is left behind. That's their biggest thing. A global community where no one is left behind. And you were doing it before
Well,
office hours. And I think it's important to mention that and I'm sort of, I guess I'm sort of going into something that next week we're going to have a transformational conversation about digital literacy. And I'm having a conversation with Dr. Hasma Gaijar of Cape Town, South Africa, and he's going to be on with me next week. And part of the reason that we're having that conversation next week is because people have technology. They have phones, they have tablets, they have computers, but they are not maximizing the use of those things. And the reason why I bring that up is because the things that you were sharing with the circadians years ago and the things that office hours is talking about now in terms of a global community where no one is left behind, sometimes that has to be shared and spoken out loud because people sometimes forget or it doesn't register with them that they are a part of it used to be where people were in their isolated communities and there was very little interaction. But we are actually in a time now where it is a global world. It is an opportunity to speak to people no matter where they are on the planet. And it's instantaneous. And I think the reason the conversation with Tony Mobley exists is because a lot of the problems that happen in the world, and I'm not trying to say that we are going to solve the problems of the world, but one of the biggest problems of the world is that people don't talk to each other. People don't talk to each other. And so if you talk about Blab and Meerkat, Zoom, Google Plus, any social media, Facebook, the issue is conversation. People have to talk to one another. People have to engage where they are hearing what someone else is saying. You know, I shared this a long time ago. There was, I don't know if it was a teacher. I can't remember exactly who it was that told me this, but when you ask someone how they are doing, wait until you get a response. Don't go into asking the question. And I didn't mean to get into this whole thing of sort of vocalizing this whole thing, but it when you ask someone how they're doing, wait. Hear what they have to say. Because
Well,
most of the time people respond based on the fact that they don't think that you're listening or that you're even interested in what the real answer is. And so this idea of engagement, I think, is extremely important. And that was the path that I initially was trying to go down with you on Stan. So anything you want to say to that,
well,
please feel free.
couple of things. One, I want to point out that, if you solve, you were talking about you can't solve all the world's problems. If you solve one of them, that's a win. That's just the way it is, right? If you can just solve one of them, that's one less problem that we don't have to, to worry about. But when it comes to engagement, I will tell you something that I don't know that if you know this or not, but I know David Amerland, some of those guys I palled around back in the day, and some pretty big SEO guys, which is the search engine optimization, right? So I wrote a letter to a bunch of them and said, I think y'all are off. I think when you're talking about search engine optimization, that's one thing, and it does definitely do it. You need to have that in order for somebody to find you sometimes. However, and I've actually bought this. I said SEO for me means strategic engagement optimization. So I actually bought the domain strategic engagement optimization. But when I talk to those guys, one of the things I have to admit, when somebody blows me off sometime, I'm like, whatever, I'm not going to do that. Right. I, as the expression goes, let that dream die, because somebody told me that it wasn't a good idea. But when I go back and revisit those things, I'm like, yeah, it was a great idea. It was a real good idea, so I'm going to answer one question. I'm going to tell Taylor something. I can't remember the first one. I can't remember whether it was a Zenith or what, but it was my first one that I actually spent my money on. I'm going to see if he remembers what this is, was a Trash 80. That was the first computer that I had. Now he's going to have to figure out that's what we called them, was Trash 80s. And then I got a IBM 50Z, which had a 0 weight state, and it had I had friends. It was one of the first color monitors. I had friends that drove, 50 miles to come over and sit down at it. And it took, I paid $600 for a 30 meg drive. 30 megs, right? So it was, I wouldn't say that was one of about a week later, that wasn't one of my proudest moments in my life as far as expenditures. But anyway, Tony, I think that everything that you said is absolutely correct. I don't think they don't, if you notice, people that listen circle back, right? They might tell you something else, but they always come back to the original thing, is that, yeah, if you're not listening to somebody, you definitely can't hear what it is that they're saying. And I'm as guilty as the next person sometimes, sometimes because sometimes, and this has to do with the way the world comes around and crushes us, we just don't hear it. There is that too. It's like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear that part anymore because of whatever reason that it is. But you try to keep an open mind. I'm not telling you that, I'm not saying that, I'm not saying that I do that much, because I've been accused of being compassionate to a fault. So there's that. Yes, Taylor, I did.
Our next question is from Dr. Chris Clark. Does Stan have a story or two about the memorable gig during which he played one of those beautiful guitars displayed behind him?
Well, I'll tell you about, because both of them would take a while, but I will tell you that one right there, that one is I bought in, that would have been in the 80s. And it was when I was running these shoe stores, and I had to stay in Kansas. I was in Kansas City, and I had to, you know, I wanted to take a day off. So I was in shorts and a t-shirt, my normal attire, you know, and I walk into this place with flip-flops on. I'm a young guy. And although I was running all these shoe stores and had, you know, I had plenty of expendable cash, I went in there to buy a guitar. That one is the Alvarez Yairi, and inside of it is a signature by one of the Yairi brothers. That's how that when I told the Yairi, when I called them one day about getting it fixed, and they got some guy on the phone. He goes, "Is that like this? Does it have this number? Does it have one of these numbers in it?" Because they track all that stuff. And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, send it to us and we'll get this." And I was like, I immediately went, "I am not sending it there," you know, because y'all just too excited about getting y'all's hands on it. But when I went in the store to buy this thing, the guy said, I'd looked at all these other guitars. They were, you know, $100, pretty cheap guitars and everything like that. But they had this special room that had those kind of guitars in it. And so I walked into it, and when I reached for it, he grabbed my hand. And he said, because I'd played all the other ones, and I reached for it, and he said, "You can look at it, but you can't play it." And I went, "Okay." And so I looked at a couple more. I looked at a couple more guitars, and then I said, "Man, I'll get back." And so I left, and I went to the bank, got the cash, right? Because we didn't have cards then, right? We didn't have debit cards or anything like that. So I came back, and without playing that guitar, I didn't even pick it up to play it. I went over there and said, "I want that guitar right there." And I think it was back then, it was like $550 or something like that, which is what, I mean, that was an expensive guitar back when you think about the year it was, right? And the guy comes up, and he goes, you know, he's standing there. I said, "Yeah, I'll take that one." And he's at the counter, and I count off, you know, 6 $100 bills. Boom, 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 boom. And he reached for it, and I grabbed his hand and said, "You look at it, but you can't touch it." I said, "I'm gonna buy a guitar from that guy right over there." And so another guy got the sale for the guitar, and so that's how I bought it. And I think my favorite story about that guitar was I was playing in this gig in I did this thing that was like it was called the Point in Kansas City. There was several times I lived in Kansas City, but I was playing in a bar in Kansas City, and I had different nights. I did different things, and this guy came up to, when jam session happened, anybody could come up and play, right? So I saw this guy come in. I was looking. One of my buddies had brought him in there, and I was like, you know, this is going to be crazy, you know. So anyway, he gets up. You know, I said, "Anybody wants to come up and play can come up and play." And he got up. And when he did, I turned around, and I set that guitar down. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, I ain't playing with you, man." And so he turned his back so that nobody could see him. And he said, "You'll be able to tell your grandkids that you played with Stephen Stills." And I went, "I am in, brother." You know, I am going to play. And we played. I would say he played Marrakesh Express. I just kind of got lost all the way through it, because I don't know if do you know who Stephen Stills is?
No, I don't.
Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
Oh,
He was
yes. Oh, yes.
Yep.
Oh,
He was
yes.
he was the guitarist for them. He's just like this really unbelievable guitarist. And but it was like, okay, you know, that was but that's the story about that guitar. That one over there is a Strat. And I originally bought one that looked exactly like Ry Cooder's, because I really liked Ry Cooder, but my son didn't like it. My son's a great guitarist, and my son didn't like it, so he traded in the guitar that I had wanted all my life. You know, he traded that guitar in and got that one. And that one is actually if you know much about guitars, that's actually a genuine Strat versus the one that I had purchased. Yeah, let's see. Oh, hey, Nazim. Wow, that's awesome.
Very cool.
Yep.
So Taylor Sunderhouse is back with another question. Did you run your BBS on your Commodore 64?
Do you know what the BBS is?
No, I don't.
That's a
I
bulletin.
did have a Commodore 64, but I don't remember what that is.
Well, you was way ahead of the curve then. Commodore 64. I did run one on. I didn't like the Commodores in particular, and I didn't really like but BBS is a bulletin board system, and so I didn't really, I didn't like the Commodores that much, but I did attempt to run one on that.
Okay. We have a question, and I can't quite make out. It looks like Nazine.
Yeah, that's Nazim. You know Nazim?
Yes, I remember Nazine.
Yeah.
Hello, Nazine.
Yeah.
Stan, opinion on Chat GPT and the new push of AI.
Well, it is definitely not something that's going to stop. It's like all technology. It's not going to stop. It's just going to continue, and it is going to get better. You're talking to, when I first started talking to people back in the 90s about video calls and stuff, everybody, they called me Dick Tracy, and they made up all sorts of names for me, like, man, because I kept saying, you're going to be watching TV shows on your computer. You're going to have it on, and they were all like, that's not going to happen. That's never going to happen. So I've watched technology from things that people said this is not going to work up to where it's at now. Chat GPT. I think all of those applications that have to do with artificial intelligence are good, and are going to get really, really better. But eventually, just in my opinion, eventually Arnold Schwarzenegger is going to have to come back and kill the Terminator and get all that stuff out of the world, right? Because the machines are going to take over. I'm just kidding. I don't trust the artificial intelligence for 100% at this point.
Okay, fair enough.
Yep.
Let's see. Can you share a past success and a recent success and what you learned from them?
Okay. A past success. Yeah. A past success that would have probably, I've experienced more than one, so like everybody has, but I think probably the first one that I experienced had to do with the shoe stores, and because I had been working, I was really young, and I don't even think I was 17 and a half or something, and I got moved to Tallahassee, Florida for a Butler shoe store. And, I was young, and I spent more time in the pool room than I did in the store. So, I was let go, and so when I went from that to within 6 months. Well, no, let me change that. I went from that to 9 months. I'll change that time when in 9 months, I was the assistant general manager at Bass Boot Division of None But Shoe Company. So that was a tremendous change, right? From being in a place where, you weren't wanted anymore to being in a place where I was. And that was, and what I learned from that was that things can change. I've used this expression since then, and it's actually one that my grandfather used, and that is that, good things happen to people that wait, right? Great things happen all at once, just like that. And so I've always that's the lesson that I got from that, was that good things happen to those that wait. Great things happen all at once.
Very cool. Very cool. And what about a recent one?
A recent one is that I'm working with my sons. It don't get any better than that. Yeah. I've got,
absolutely.
We have a firm. I can't get into everything because you and I've talked about that. That was one of the things about coming in here. But I work with my sons, and the other partner just went over and visited Nazim in Italy, actually. And so I think all of that is what is or wins, all of them. Being able to work. Didn't say that we have great, wonderful days where everybody is smiley and everything's great, because it's really different when you have when it's a family business. But the very fact that I was asked to go into their business was a win.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Stan, for sharing that. And let's see if we have another question. This is a good time. We have a few more minutes if the community has some questions for Stan. So, excuse me. I'm not going to ask you for their names, but can you talk about how many grandchildren you have now?
Well, that's a success too, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I got 9 grandchildren. I've got 9, and there's the oldest one is 8, and all of the rest of them are under the age of either 4 or 5. I'm the granddad. I could call her and she could tell you exactly, right? But they're either under that age of 4 or 5. I can't tell you exactly. I know that's a bad thing, but it's just the way that it is. And they are Cheryl, we get to, because we work with our sons, my wife gets to do babysitting duty with them, which means we stay in touch. There's usually there's at least over here during the week, there's 2 of them over here at least all, just about every day. We get to see one of them every day because they live 6 doors down from us. But
oh, wow.
Yeah, they live 6 doors down from us. So, we do the whole trading food and sending stuff and keep the baby and that kind of stuff. We're going to do, I think it's this Saturday. We've got one of them for half a day and then the other one for the other half.
Oh, wow. That's very cool. That's very cool. I think that for them, I'm sure it's ideal that the fact that you guys are that close. Absolutely. The next question is, please tell us about your continued professional and personal development.
Well, I would tell you that you and I are probably on a very similar path, and that we're studious about stuff. Like we are spontaneous. We do like to have fun. We do that, but we also study the material before we actually, make comments and stuff like that. And right now I'm studying several things right now. I'm actually studying 3 things. One of them has to do with the industry that I'm in. Like I said, I can't get into the details about that, but the things that I can tell you that I'm studying is I am putting together a site about training, about learning and helping people learn how to do certain things. And it will be, it won't be on one subject. It will be driven by the people who are in that community. Very similar to the circadians. I think now people are more aware that kind of thing can happen, because back in the day, when you said, "Hey, well, I'll introduce you to somebody. I'll introduce you to Nazim. I don't know how to speak Italian." It's like, well, he does. He knows how to speak English, so it'll work out all right. But now everybody's kind of gotten used to that. When you talk to people about you were talking to somebody in all these different countries, or they kind of didn't understand that you would be able to do that without too much of a struggle. And so I'm studying that. I am also learning a new videography application. I'm getting knee deep in that because I always like to learn. I mean, when somebody tells me when I retire, they'll ask me, "Well, when are you going to retire?" As soon as they shovel that stuff over the top of me, that's probably when I'm going to officially retire. Up until that day, because my job here is not, educating people and doing that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's part of it. But my job here is to help people, right? That's what my job is, and that's what your job is to try to help people in every way that you can. And if I quit doing that, you might as well put that dirt on top of me, because
I agree.
I'm done.
I agree. I'm in the same boat with you, Stan, in terms of this whole thing, what I'm doing right now. And I could talk to you about all of the different things that I learned in office hours, like video pencil and Zoom OSC and Zoom rooms and a vmix, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. And when I think that I just about got something, then I go to the next thing and try to learn that as well. But I wanted to make sure that I did get this in. Nazim wants to know, when are you coming to Italy?
When am I coming to Italy? Well, Nazim, I'm glad that you asked that question, because I want to answer it the only way that I know how to answer it, and that fits my personality in a way that it does. I am going to come to Italy as soon as I have a sponsor. So if you sponsor my trip to Italy, Nazim, I will get that ticket tomorrow.
Very cool.
Nah, truthfully, we're going to try to get over there. We really did talk about going over there this year. We got a lot of other stuff that's going on with 9 grandkids, and our parents, or Cheryl's parents. There's things that are happening that kind of keep some of that from working. But I do want to tell Taylor one thing, because he was talking about technology, right? You remember that question? I told him, I said, I'm going to tell you something about me that's going to surprise you, right? Although I, was in retail, and although I was, I was also vice VP of internet development for banking, kind of a bank that had like 17 locations, and I was information security officer for the state of Georgia for the Department of Education, right, with kindergarten all the way up to college. As the network. And I always laugh when I tell everybody that, because I had that all I had was the high school education. I didn't have any college. So whenever I went into those meetings, I always talked slower. And I tell them, I'm going to talk slower so y'all can keep up with me, right? Because y'all had all those propeller heads and digital heads going on. But they knew I was kidding too. I mean, the truth is, either you know how to do it or you don't. And there's three questions. There's really, when somebody asks you questions, there's really three answers: yes, no, or I got to ask somebody. That's the three answers. There's really, that's it. So when you're in those kind of positions like that one there was a lot of times when I went, I don't know how that works. Call Taylor. That's his specialty. It's not mine.
Okay, Stan, we are down to the last question. And the question is, you're speaking to the world. What do you want them to know?
I want them to know that it's going to be all right. That's what I want them to know, is that regardless of what anybody tells them, when you look, and Nazim knows this, he and I talked about this and agree on this, you can get down. You can say whatever you want to about, the younger generation, but just remember, you were that younger generation, and that's exactly what everybody said about you. Exactly. Is that, man, they ain't got no sense, and they don't do this, and they're lazy, and they do whatever. Well, it'll be all right. It will. And that's basically my whole message, is that, everything's going to be all right. To quote, who would I be quoting? Every little thing gonna be all right.
Every little thing will be all right.
Yeah.
Be all right.
That's
Yes,
it.
sir. Thank you, Stan Bush, for being with me tonight on Conversation with Tony Mobley. I really appreciate it. Tell your wife hello, and thank you so much for sharing you with us this evening. I just want to share with our few last words. Conversation with Tony Mobley is produced by valued audio, video, visual professionals who meet daily on Office Hours Global, hosted by Alex Lindsay. Thank you, Z98.1 FM, LinkedIn Live, YouTube, Conversation with Real People. Last week, we had a great conversation with Mr. Michael Forrest of Squares TV. And when you have time, please go back and look at the 80+ episodes of Conversation with Tony Mobley. I think you will find something that you like and hopefully is helpful. Conversation with Tony Mobley can be heard on 98.1 FM, our radio listening audience in Cincinnati, Ohio. Thanks to Taylor Sunderhouse and the team behind Conversation with Tony Mobley for making this happen. Mr. Stan Bush, thank you for our conversation today and for doing the work that you do and being the person who you are. Conversations with Tony Mobley will continue next week with Dr. Hasmukh Gaijar. And our conversation will be about transforming human capital through digital literacy. Thank you all so much for coming. Take care. God bless. Good night. And we are sharing our thanks to the community in the rolling credits. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tony.